Hello and welcome to the Berkcast, the How to Train Dragon podcast. I'm your host HC, and with me are.
Rush 2112.
And Wolf.
And today we are asking the biggest question about the How to Train Dragon franchise. One that people had in their minds probably as soon as the franchise started. This question has been debated for years throughout the entire canon of the franchise. Okay. thank you for ruining the big build up, but yeah. Anyway, today we are asking the question: is How to Train a Dragon really about the dragons?
But HC, it's in the title. It has to be about dragons. You are wrong, sir.
Well, here's the thing. Pokemon is named after the little creatures, but it's not necessarily about them. So, I ask you guys, is How to Train a Dragon about the dragons?
Awesome. Anyway, I guess I'll go first.
Awesome. That's the question.
Yeah.
Raj,
I'm letting both of you go first on this one.
Yeah.
know.
Raj, do you want pizza? Awesome.
Yeah. Well, because nobody was talking. That was what it was for. But yeah.
Okay. You want to go first?
I mean, I guess I'll go first, so we don't have any awkward silences there. And Wolf said he'll go last, and Wolf usually has some good views on these.
Yeah, he waits until we get our thoughts out, and then he can disagree with both of us.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's always the plan.
That's the point. It's
I'm
not like
to you.
He never makes his own opinion. He just makes it. Or he just listens to us and then says the exact opposite of what we say. Anyway.
Okay.
Shh! Don't tell them the plan. You'll ruin it.
Crap. Sorry. Don't put it in the script next time, HC. I just spoiled it.
Who put it on the script? I have no idea what you guys are talking about. What plan?
The plan for me to actually get going with the script. Anyway,
Yeah, go ahead already.
Right.
Come on.
So, to be 100% honest, I will be on the no side. I do not think How to Train Your Dragon is really about your dragons. And that's, I guess, well, that's just part. We'll go around and say if we do or don't first.
Okay, so you say no.
No.
Okay. I'll say maybe it's a bit of a cop out, but I'll say not necessarily. And what I mean by not necessarily is that overall, no, I don't think it's about the dragons, but the dragons are a part of how this world works. It's about like the dragons are a big part of this franchise, but it's not necessarily about them specifically.
Yeah.
That's
Just looking at the two movies
Absolutely.
separately.
Yeah.
Which one would you say? Look at the two movies separately, and then give an answer for both movies separately.
Oh, yeah, if that's the case, number 2 is more about dragons, because it wouldn't happen really without the dragons.
Yeah,
Even
because
though the story is really, Hiccup's coming of age, it wouldn't happen without the dragons.
yeah, and also there's this thing that in the second one we are seeing more of the world, so there are obviously going to be more dragons around the world.
Okay. Well, my answer to that question would be, to the first movie, I don't think it's about dragons plural. I think it's about a dragon, but even then, that's somewhat pushing it, and we'll get into that. So I would say no to the question. Now, looking at the second movie, as Rush said, I would say yes to the question.
Although,
So
I'll get to
this just confirmed. Wolf confirmed the cop out because that was. I get what you mean, but at the same time, it's like, is How to Train a Dragon about the dragons? Listen, in the first movie, no. In the second one, yes.
Yeah. I'll actually get to my analogy later from our last topic on why you could actually see number 2 as well as being no. But so I'll go for I'll explain my no and yes right now, and why it could possibly be no for the second movie. So for the first movie, let's put it this way: you don't even need it to be about dragons. You could. Actually, I guess I'll get to the analogy now. You could really replace it with any sort of evil that they see, right? Because we go back to Wolf's original argument that maybe the Vikings are the evil ones or the antagonists of the story. But you put them against anything. Maybe like it's the Romans, right? And so they fight Roman legionnaires and stuff like that in the not the dragon.
It happens in the books, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
But that's later. It's not in the first book. It's in the third.
I
or
remember
second
in
book.
the third.
Third book.
Great guys. Anyway.
It's not a major spoiler or
Okay,
anything.
anyway.
They're not really important to the story.
It's just something that's mentioned. It's not.
I mean, a lot of both How to Train Your Dragon 1 and 2 focus on Hiccup as the main character and center of attention. But in Toothless, well, yes, he is a focus. He could be replaced with whatever they are fighting against.
I would disagree that it could be another human, though.
Okay, not humans, yes, but you can replace
Not
it with something
humans,
else.
man. It could have been a dinosaur. It could have been another. Wait a minute, it did happen. It's called the Good Dinosaur. I forgot. Anyway,
I don't
you
remember
could
them fighting
replace
any good dinosaur there, but
replacing Toothless with a Roman soldier doesn't exactly work as well in the context of that part of the story.
yes,
now, any
you
other
could
creature,
communicate a little
though,
better,
absolutely.
yes. But yeah, I kind of went to I'll get to the original analogy later, but yeah, I mean, I guess the reason why it doesn't work with the Roman or the human aspect is because the communication barrier. We're not evil, don't kill us, right? We're being controlled, or as the Nazis would say, we were just following orders.
It's not just that, though. It's you have to remember, like, if you look at the first movie, it very much is a story of a boy and his dog, right?
Mm-hmm.
That story doesn't work as well if the dog can talk and communicate extremely well.
Yeah,
We'll make him mute.
I want to bring another thing up. There's another thing I want to bring up, that it's a boy and a dog story, but in a sense, not in the sense that you're already going to think about when I bring up the name of the piece, but it's also kind of like Romeo and Juliet kind of things. Two characters who shouldn't be friends. Yeah. Not in that sense, these two characters that shouldn't.
Topic number 572.
No, it's not controversial because I'm not trying to be controversial.
I'm
but
sure there's a
just
fan
making a
fiction that's
joke.
already done something along these lines, though.
Yes.
With all the sadness that's within the matter, there probably is.
Well, with all the innuendo as well.
There's also probably a fanfic where Hiccup Old Yeller's toothless. And the dog.
Oh,
I'm
sure. I'm sure.
Wow. Okay, guys.
I'm
no,
sorry for ruining your week.
No. Anyway, but you know
I mean,
what
Toothless
I mean.
did already Old Yeller Stoic.
Yeah, Stoic, you're getting too old, mate. We gotta take you out.
What the fuck is this episode becoming?
Hey.
Anyway,
but okay, sorry. Now I'll get on to number 2. So yes, you can replace it with another creature, which that's basically my basis for why it's not really about the dragons. And the other basis I really have is that it is mainly centered around Hiccup. Like, you see the first movie, it's about him overcoming being a screw-up with the help of a friend that doesn't have to be a dragon. Lots of hand-waving going on. And then the second movie, yes, you do need the dragons to get everywhere and world build, but you could kind of do the same with a ship. It just would take a lot longer, right? But then you get to the point of where, the hardest point to try and use smoke and mirrors to cover up the fact that it isn't about dragons, which is when Drago kills Stoic with Hiccup's best friend. You're thinking, well, how can you replace that? You could replace it in theory with another animal. Somehow Drago is just a traveling circus with a bunch of animals trying to conquer the world. Not very successful since they're not
with the
fire
circus.
Yeah, well, they're not fire-breathing, flying animals.
What is this? What is this?
normally.
Do I hear a How to Train Your Dragon in Madagascar crossover?
Oh, God.
Yeah, can
it
you
gets a little
see?
bit harder to
No. Imagine this. The scene where Toothless is mind controlled and is about to shoot at Hiccup, and it's Marty going ta 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 circus ta ta ta. Yeah, here's your black humor for the episode. Hashtag sorry.
Right.
If that's black humor, what was it before then?
It was just dark. It was just black at that point. Yeah, it's like it's because I guess killing Stoic is funny, guys.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Every time.
My tears are from laughter. Duh.
Watch that scene and tell me you don't bust out laughing.
You know what? When the gang took a selfie, I was really happy for them. It's not every day. It's not every day you take a selfie near something like this. Anyway,
yes, but so it gets harder to replace, but it's not necessarily impossible to find some other scenario where it isn't about dragons. So that's why I was on the fence about 2, but it's still about Hiccup becoming chief with his friend. Remember, hand waving his friend of undeterminate species. So it doesn't have to be about dragons, and that's basically my closing argument.
Okay, so pretty much all of us said no.
Yeah,
I think didn't you say yes though? Kind of.
I said not
for
necessarily.
the second movie.
No, not necessarily. Yeah.
But okay, so all of us pretty much said no. So what do you think it is about? How to Train Your Dragon is about, in your opinion? Rush, you started last time, so.
Well, I think he just kind of told us.
Yeah,
why.
it's about Hiccup. The first movie is about Hiccup trying to not be a screw up and gain the village trust with a special friend. Okay, that's a wrong way of putting it. With a good friend of an indeterminate species. Oh my!
Are you saying Toothless isn't his special friend?
In a fan fiction sense, wink, yes. And then the second movie is, as everybody agrees, it's a coming of age story for Hiccup, him becoming chief, taking on responsibility, and having an indeterminate species friend. So really, it's all centered. That's really what it is about. It's about a boy, and people say, oh, it's about a boy and his dragon. It's about a boy and his best friend. Excuse me.
Okay, so is that it, or do you have another thing you want to say?
No, that's really all. That was just summarizing what I kind of said in the first bit.
Okay, so I'll agree that it's basically about a boy and his dragon. For if you want to get super technical about it, but I won't say it's about the dragons, but it's about about the coexistence of Vikings and dragons. Because let's think about it. In the first movie, is pretty much about how the Vikings want to kill the dragons and get rid of them because, well, the dragons are evil and steal their food and destroy their houses and their homes and stuff. And there's this boy who finds a wooden dragon and becomes his friends, and he changes the perspective. Okay, this is first 2 seasons of the show. And I guess you can say the shorts to some extent are about how the Vikings are adjusting to the idea of the dragons being their allies, not their enemies. And I'll say Race to the Edge and How to Train Your Dragon 2 are also pretty much about the same thing. Like, how do I word this? The dragons being your friends, and then there's the dragons being used for your own personal gain, like trading in Viggo's case or taking over the world in Dragon's case. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not necessarily about the dragons, but more the relationship between dragons and Vikings at the time. And yeah, obviously, when you get down to the basic, it's about a boy and his dragon and how they complete each other in some sense or another. That's my opinion.
Okay, Wolf, your thoughts on this?
Uh, what do I think? Looking at the first movie, I would say I would agree with you to some degree. I think you can definitely look at the dragons in the first movie and replace them, and I think you can, for the most part, replace Toothless with a different creature, whatever it is that you wish to replace it with. It might be a little bit silly, but you could do it, and you wouldn't see an overall change to the story for the most part. The story would still play out in a very similar fashion for the most part. It might be a bit more silly to put any kind of creature in that situation and scenario, but it would definitely still play out in a similar manner for the story wise. But I would say, yeah, looking at the title of the franchise very literally, then looking at that as well, like, is something we should probably bring up and talk about. Looking at the title literally, How to Train Your Dragon. We definitely don't learn anything about How to Train Your Dragon in the first or second movie.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing that gets trained is Toothless training Hiccup how to fly. That's about the only thing that gets trained, and even that is barely. If you want to learn to talk about things that how you learn something, then in the first movie you learn how to kick a dragon's butt. Stoic shows us how to do that. Although you do need to be able to throw a wagon at a dragon. It's difficult for most people, I'm sure.
Almost there.
You might still have a ways to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a pretty big wagon. It's solid wood with hay in it as well. You need to be able to throw the entire thing with one arm.
Fine.
Damn.
I can at least lift. No, just kidding.
Rush, do you even lift? There we go.
But looking at the second film, I would say you would find it more difficult to replace the dragons with a different creature, I think, because of how intrinsic they are to the story, because it is about Drago using them to take over, I guess, the quote-unquote world, however big the world is to Drago at that time. But yeah, I would say, that it's very much a little bit situational looking at the two movies, and I would say that I'm floundering here. Move on.
No, I was just gonna say, remember how I said it gets a little bit more ridiculous, because if we kept the same species that we did in the first movie, the second movie, then it'd be like Drago's like a traveling circus with the animals or whatever they're doing.
Mm-hmm. If I'll go to a circus and see a guy like Drago running the thing, I will be no, this guy can't run a circus.
He already lost an
this
arm
guy,
to one, yeah.
Yeah.
But,
no, you will see what happens when I feed this lion some meat. The meat takes out his arm in the middle of the act. Oh, because he screams all the time.
I alone control the indeterminate species. But
I will be, Rush saying the Drago voice, I will be the Lion King.
I will be the Lion King.
Awesome.
Anyways, moving on.
Episode complete.
We should still answer this
actually,
question.
Before this, Wolf actually brought up a point that I want to talk about. He said that looking at the title, let's be honest, the movies are called How to Train a Dragon because that's the name of the books.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too.
Yeah, so not much to it, but I do want to bring up something.
Really, the title of the movie should be How to Befriend a Dragon if you're really,
No.
lucky.
No, listen to me.
I am listening.
So, I'm not sure if I mentioned this on mic before, but the translators, whoever they are, translated the movie over here to My First Dragon. And yeah, it's pretty dumb to go up to a movie theater and tell the cashier, I want a ticket for My First Dragon 2. I am aware of this. It's not the best title for a sequel, but but here's the thing. The reason why apparently they changed it from How to Train a Dragon to My First Dragon is because the dragons in the movies are becoming more like pets than a creature you train to help you. And so So Wolf, try to look at this with that title of My First Dragon. Do you think it changes anything about this? Oh,
From the second movie, maybe not from the first movie though. Walking in, if you like, you've heard nothing but the title, right? When you walk into the film and you've heard nothing but the title of My First Dragon, I think you would expect a different film than what you're actually getting when you see it. Even from How to Train Your Dragon, like hearing just the title alone, if you've never seen the film, I think what you would expect for How to Train Your Dragon is maybe a little bit similar to what you get from the first movie, but My First Dragon I don't think works all that well for the first movie, at
Yeah,
least
because at the
anyways.
beginning, it's like, geez, these guys are killing dragons? When does he get his first dragon? My First Dragon kind of sounds like... Well, My First Dragon kind of sounds like everybody's getting dragons, and it's your turn to earn one or something like that.
It does go along with the books a lot better, though. That title does.
Yeah.
yeah. Well, probably the reason why when they actually released the book over here, it goes by My First Dragon. Even still.
That actually sounds like a really good title for the books, actually.
So it's a good title for the book, but not for the movie. So, which inspired that title. So, ironic. And you know what? The translators over here, for the most part, suck. So I'm glad you said it because it's another proof of how they fucked up. But, And again, My First Dragon 2. I'm telling you, the cashier is going to laugh at me when I come up to her in
My First Dragon 3.
Yes, exactly.
Had 3 first dragons.
Yeah.
This kid's
Yeah.
really
Yeah,
bad.
that's what I was about to say. This kid's either really forgetful, really bad, or a little of both.
Yeah. You know what the funny thing is? Some of my friends actually started nicknaming the movies My Second Dragon and My Third Dragon, just for it to make sense. But then it gives you the impression that there are different toothlesses.
There might be. How do we know there's not, though? There might actually be.
Next video, a conspiracy.
Is there more than one
toothless? Toothless in the second movie isn't the same Toothless. He died in the first movie.
Yeah.
How did they replace him? You'll never know.
He was reborn from the
Special
ashes
effects.
of the fire.
There you go. There's your replacement.
Anyway,
fan fiction writers. There's a wonderful fan fiction you could write right there.
yeah, go.
Wonderful idea
go.
prompt.
Go do whatever the hell you want for that, and send me the paycheck in the mail. Anyway, send Wolf the paycheck in the mail anyway.
Yeah.
And people get paid for writing fan
I give out
fiction.
free ideas.
Well, we don't. Okay, send the paycheck to us then, right? HC.
Yeah.
That's my idea. I claim it so you don't get anything either.
But I said how Toothless was reborn, so yeah, I still get. Actually, you give it for free. I gave half of the idea, and Rush did nothing. So sorry, Rush, no money for you.
Well, if we're doing this capitalistic, that means that I get everything if I do nothing. Sorry. No, I'm just kidding.
Moving on.
Yeah.
Moving on. Okay, so let's pretend just for a second that we all said yes, and that How to Train a Dragon is about the dragons. Let's pretend for a second we said yes. Do you think, as the franchise is right now, do some aspects of it detract from the dragons if they are supposed to be the main point?
Do we want to look at just the movies here, or
yes, because
overall?
we all know that that everything detracts from the dragons in the TV show, pretty much.
Yeah, and you know that I might get it out of the way now. One of the reasons I chose to do this, chose this to be the topic of the episode, is that I saw a few people discussing it in the Berg forums that. I don't remember specifics, but somebody said, I want dragons, not dragon hunters. So the people who might debate the most if How to Train a Dragon is about the dragons are people who take the TV show into consideration. That said, it's part of the franchise, and there are new dragons in the show, not in the movies. So, and we can bring it up if you want. Let's compromise on this.
Hmm.
Fair enough. Anyway, I'll stay out for it because I basically said my bit. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that detracts from, so it doesn't even matter. In the first movie, let's see. Again, we're gonna split it up into movie, even though you say aspects of the franchise. To its credit, one aspect of the franchise that actually leads to the dragons, as I'm pretty sure we can all agree on, is the world building. That is first off, like, just made for flying dragons or flying of any sort. But then, if we get to just, it's hard to say that they actually detract from it because the way that they've used the dragons in the franchise is done really well. It's done so well that you really can't say, oh, this detracts from it or this detracts from it. But you can. It's also done to a point where you say, oh, you don't actually need them. You can replace them or something like that. So,
They're very much, at least as far as the first movie is concerned, they're more so backdrop and setting than they are an extremely important plot point.
Yeah. So that's why, I mean,
except for the end of the film, which is a bit different.
Yeah. So you get to that, but it's even though they are a backdrop setting, it's an important. I mean, you can't say something detracts from the setting really easily. But I don't think that there's much that detracts from the dragons themselves. You could say little things like maybe giving them automated weaknesses like shot limits and stuff kind of makes them less important.
Yeah, but the shot limits are something that's from the movies, not the show. The movies build up that fact.
That's why I'm saying, I'm keeping the movies.
Okay.
Yeah, but other than that, I really can't think of anything that would detract from the dragons. Even though we've clearly stated no, in such a way that we should have something, I really don't.
Okay, it's a very different kind of question, right? Like, just because we don't think the movies are inherently about the dragons specifically doesn't mean there's things in there that detract from them.
Yeah, like I said, they were written really well in such a way that you can't find a way to see like, oh, you can replace them, but it doesn't do anything against them, even if you keep them in.
Okay, so from where I stand, it does split into the categories. Do you look at the movies or do you look at the TV show? But since this is all the same franchise and the TV show is canon, as far as I'm aware, nothing deconfirmed that it's canonicity or something. So it's canon for all we know.
Many people would disagree with you.
Many people are wrong. Because
I mean, they declared it canon, even though you don't like it. That's unfortunate. That's the unfortunate truth.
I have no problem with people. If people don't like the show and just decide to ignore it and that it's not canon for them, then that's a different story. But saying that they didn't intend it to be canon is something else. But anyway, back to my point. You know what? Let's say that the movies are supposed to be about the dragons, okay? Even if we don't see it, let's assume for the sake of the argument that was the point. Then if it was the point of the movies to be about the dragons, then the TV show kind of ruins the point because it gives more attention to the humans. And we get more... You know what? How many new dragons are in the show compared to new human characters?
Ooh. There's more new dragons than there are new human characters.
I'd say
unless you count all of the Defenders of the Wing and the
in terms
Valkyrie.
of Defenders of the Wing, you know what? Let me say this. In terms of Defenders of the Wing, let's just say Mala and what's the name of the guy? Rafnat. Yeah, him.
Yeah,
let's say both of them.
Things that we have known names for. Like they name the dragons, they don't necessarily name the background people. Feels bad.
So and like when we say Riker, Vigo, and Krogan, all of those are new characters, but older soldiers are not necessarily characters. They're just background.
Okay. Then
So
I would say they're somewhat even.
yeah, let's okay. Quick countdown: Mildew, Alvin, Heather, Dagger, Johan, Savage, and Riker, Vigo, Mala,
Mulch, Bucket,
Mulch,
Silence
Bucket,
Man.
Silence Man.
His three
Where-
cousins.
let's say like characters that have a decent amount of screen time.
All right.
It won't necessarily be fair because there are a few dragon species that show up for one episode specifically.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, they show up for one episode and
But
they're there for a
focused
decent
on
amount
the
of time.
episode, yeah.
Like
Okay, I
Sven's
don't feel-
cousins or what have you, are like there for like
Okay, so
a
Kind of
portion.
those-
Yeah.
we're on 12. We're on 12 so far.
Anyway,
Um,
yeah.
And so we said Riker and Vigo, Krogan, Mara, and and what's the name of the leader of the ladies who want to eat Not Loud again?
Oh yeah. I don't even. Isn't it like Talia or something like
Okay,
that?
Hair.
Whatever. it
Hair.
is.
Let's call her Hair.
There's also the one hunter who kidnapped Hiccup, who reappeared in a later episode, whose name I can't remember, who's not
Like
allowed had a good back and
Enos or
forth,
something like that.
something like that.
Okay,
He
so,
has a decent amount of screen time that I would say he's a character that's introduced in the show.
Okay, so we have 17 human characters from the show.
With a
who-
decent amount of screen time, yeah.
Yes, we have 17. Now let's try and count the dragons. So we have the Whispering Death, the Screaming Death,
Typhumerang.
Typhumerang,
We have
Thunderdrome,
Thunderdrum's Changewing.
Changewing,
Scaldron.
Scaldron, yes,
Skrill.
Smothering Smug Breath.
Skrill, yes,
Smoke
and those
Breath.
Skrill,
Flightmare.
Lightmare, how do you call the little dragons that from Follow the Leader?
Smothering. Those are Night Terrors.
Night Terrors, exactly. Do Skullcrusher and Grump count?
Yeah.
Yeah, I
no,
would
we're
say.
we're counting them as new dragons in the franchise, right?
Yeah, but they were introduced in the second movie, though, so
That's true.
they weren't introduced in the show specifically.
And all the there are the man, what's it called, the dragon of the Defenders of the Wing, what's his name?
Great Protector.
Yeah, the Raptidon.
Raptidon.
There's
Then there's
this.
also the crud. There's the Metal Wing or whatever it's Armor Wing, Snow Wraith. Oh god, let's see what else was there.
Right now we're on 12.
13. You didn't add Smothering Smoke Breaths. So that's 13.
Okay, so 13.
Let's see what else. There's the Death Song.
That song, let's think. The Fireworms, I
Fireworms?
think. And then
Sea Shocker.
that's 15. 16. Come on, we need one more to match it out.
Well, we can.
Come
There's the Titan Wing, whatever. The one
Both
that Vigo used.
The Shell Shocker and
Shell Shocker
the
and
other one.
Yeah,
Okay, we
Yeah.
reached 7. So
but they they have a lot more. There's a
quickly
lot more extra.
counting, there are 17 new humans in the show, and there are 17 new dragons.
There's
So-
over 17.
Yeah.
So it's pretty even, all things considered.
Maybe I guess.
Okay, so back to my point. In terms of the show, while the dragons are, you can still argue that it's about the dragons because the well-being of the dragons, what the humans do with the dragons are kind of the driving force of the characters. Like if Hiccup wouldn't care about the dragons, he will most likely not encounter Vigo or Riker. And if Vigo would make a profit out of the dragons, he would never encounter Hiccup. So there's this, but on the other hand, so while the dragons are kind of a moving force in the show, it's not the main focus. It's not the main focus. Like I guess you can say the dragons are what sells toys, but if the point is supposed to be about them, yeah, I can see how some of the stories detract from it.
I don't know. I would disagree. I would say the dragons are the main force, or the moving force in the show.
Oh no, they are the moving force. But aside from being, I guess, because let's say, like I said, they could be considered plot MacGuffins to people. Okay, let me ask you this. Let's take the scene that we all love so much from the end of season 3 of Race to the Edge, where Hiccup and Vigo talk on that island filled with blue oleander. We have that scene. And so the dragons made these two characters meet up for the first time, and now they sit down and talk. Let's forget about the dragons for a second. If they talked about everything else, will the conversation be any different?
I think it would, yeah. I would say, yeah, it would. I would say it'd be somewhat different.
Yeah, but here's the key word: somewhat. How, like, what?
Yeah, but
would the main point still be there? Would they still be enemies? Would they still?
So you're talking about the conversation between who and who again? Exactly. Just want to make sure.
Hiccup and Vigo on
the island surrounded by the blue oleander.
Yes, I just said.
I would say the conversation would definitely be somewhat different. I think the key parts of the conversation would be different enough that you would be seen in a different scene. Like the scene would definitely be changed somewhat. But again, even that scene isn't necessarily about the dragons. It's just about saying, we have our side, you have your side. We don't want to fight anymore because we just want to make profit. Like it's about his profit for the dragons. So yeah, I think the scene would come across differently enough that it would be not the same thing.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good point. But again, as much as the dragons are the moving force, they are not really the focus of that specific conversation. And
no, they're not.
Yeah, and I think that's what sets people off. If that makes any sense, that. Mm-hmm. Because again, you could replace the dragons with, like, they could be dogs, they could be, I don't know, enter random creature here. It could be anything.
Yeah, you could definitely, like, I think that's kind of the biggest problem people have is, even with the show or the movies, you could replace them and it still work well enough that you wouldn't notice a huge difference, even though there would definitely be one, I feel, right? And I think that's probably the takeaway for a lot of people on the show is they want more dragons, but the question is, how do you do more about the dragons but still make the show entertaining to watch, right? And make it have a forward-moving plot. Like, how exactly would you do that? How exactly would you go forward with that? That's definitely a hard question to answer that I think a lot of people would find hard to answer. Like, it's not an easy question to answer. Like, how would you do a show about dragons where dragons are the focus, but you have these human characters here as well? What do you do with them if dragons are your focus? You have to do something there, and the focus can't necessarily just be on the dragons 100% of the time, because you wouldn't be able to move the show forward as well or as easily, for that matter. So you have to have, at the very least, you have to have Hiccup have someone to go against concerning the dragons to some degree, whether it be large or small. And I think the dragon hunters being, say, hey, we hunt the dragons for profit, even if the show focuses more on them hunting the dragons for profit and what they're doing, it still has a background focus of the dragons because that's what's moving the plot forward. They want to hunt dragons. Hiccup wants to stop them from hunting dragons.
Mm-hmm. Okay, one.
And again, go ahead.
No, because I am kind of segueing to the next subject. So if you want anything, if you have anything to say about this, say it now before we move on.
It's a hard question to answer, right? Like, does anything detract from the dragons? It's kind of like asking, does anything detract from this mountaintop in the background of Berk, right? Like, does anything detract from that? Does anything detract from this background scenery that we've painted or created for this particular scene? It's a hard question to answer because I think the dragons are a little bit more background and scenery within this franchise as a whole. And that's not to say that's a bad thing. But again, like, the focus isn't on the dragons specifically. It's the focus of these characters' interactions with the dragons. Like, that's more so the focus. And looking at the first movie, like, it's inherently focused on Hiccup befriending Toothless. Like, that's the focus. And again, I would honestly say you could, in between those scenes alone, just looking at that, you could do the forbidden friendship scene with a different creature. Whether it be mythical or not, you could do it with a different creature and it'd still work. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? But that just shows that the dragons are inherently the focus. Like, what the creature is in this movie isn't the focus. What the creatures are in this franchise isn't necessarily the focus. It's the interactions with and the bond that forms between Hiccup and Toothless in the first movie that is the focus. It's that interaction that is the focus. It's that this creature, Hiccup, learning to have confidence in himself because of this creature that is the focus. It's, that's like the focus of the first movie. And the second movie, the focus, I would say, does go back to the dragons a bit more because they're more important to the plot. But even then, they are still somewhat background. They are still somewhat scenery. Even though the second movie, I think, does try to make them feel more important. And I think the third movie will make them feel even more important as well. And then, at that point, we may come back to this question and it be somewhat of a different answer, right? We'll just have to wait and see on that one. But I think looking at it as a whole, just because we say the dragons are somewhat more scenery or background, again, like I said, it's not a bad thing. That's not a terrible thing. That's not something that's wrong with the films or the shows. I don't think there's an inherently better way that it could be done that would make the dragons feel like less background or less scenery or less world dressing, right? I don't think there's a better way you could do that to make them feel less of that. I think they're always going to feel that way because it's not inherently the focus. Neither are the Vikings. The Vikings aren't inherently the focus either. You could replace the Vikings with a different subset of people and it still come across as the same as well. Like, Hiccup doesn't have to be Hiccup. Hiccup could be something entirely different or someone entirely different, and you'd still have the same story, just somewhat different. Again, that's, go watch Old Yeller. The same story, just somewhat different. Now, granted,
very different.
Again, like, they're going to have differences, but you can replace these people. You can replace.
Yes, that's been my argument the whole time.
No, and that's why I said I agreed with you from the start, right? Like, you can replace certain things and still come across with a somewhat similar movie. Now, like changing, I'm rambling now at this point. Simply put, you can't replace the characters as who they are, but you can replace what they are, I guess you would say. Like, Hiccup doesn't have to be a Viking for this story to still work. Toothless doesn't have to be a dragon for this story to still work.
Yeah.
That's like the point, right?
I mean,
and that's not necessarily a bad thing, though.
Basically, what we're getting at, or what you're getting at, is you could make an avatar out of Pocahontas with this story.
In a way. The character can't be the same kind of character, but you could definitely say, like, if it's not Vikings, it could be Indians, Native Americans. If it's not Native Americans, it could be the Gauls or the Romans. Like, you could have them in the same situation and with this same exact kind of character. Like, Hiccup still is Hiccup. He's just no longer a Viking. He's a Roman now.
Yeah.
You could have that and it still be a somewhat similar story.
Okay. Anyway, no, I agree. Don't get me wrong. But just to kind of close this and move on to the next topic, there one point we can actually, one thing we can point out about this topic is us, like the Berkcast in general. Think about it. We've done a, a fair amount of character-centric episodes. How many of those are about a dragon character? Only one, and that will be Toothless, because he's the only dragon in the franchise that actually goes through an arc, or has a character that's not as one note, if you know what I mean. Because we spend a lot of time with him. We know exactly what he feels like. Again, we get it with the other dragons. I can tell you what Hookfang's relationship with Snotlout is. I can tell you what Meatlag's relationship with Fishlegs is. God knows we know. But when we really think about it, Toothless is the only one we managed to dedicate an episode to. The others kind of just were kind of combined with their specific riders. So that means something when we can talk more about the humans in the franchise, which is specific. If the franchise is meant to be about the dragons, and to be fair, maybe that's our fault. Maybe we can do a full episode about Stormfly or Meatlag or whoever, but I don't know. At first glance, I just thought about this. We, aside from Toothless, we never did a full character analysis of any of the dragons. So, and there's probably a reason for this.
Ideas.
Yeah, I mean, but the thing is, like, you can say that we might have enough to make it a full length. Well, okay, by our definition, full length, which is like an hour long. Also, hold on, going back. When you brought up the Berkcast and going off Wolf's topic of replacing, I was like, oh, is he gonna throw shade at some other thing that's going on right now about replacing us? Anyway.
No.
Yeah, no,
no way.
Yeah, no.
No, we'll start beef right now. Beef.
Yeah, let's go. Anyway.
I'm not replacing you guys.
No, not you replacing us. Let's talk about the other podcast that's going on.
That's right. Dragon Academy Dropouts is not as good as Berkcast. There, I said it.
Ooh,
Beef.
who else?
Let's
can
go.
you on your hour-long drive? Your commute?
We are the best podcast. They are nowhere near as good as us. There,
Okay,
it's been said.
Okay, no.
Anyway,
We were first.
Just to clarify, we have
I'm
nothing
just
against
joking,
this
by the
guy.
way.
Yeah, no.
We have nothing
They have a
against
wonderful
these guys.
podcast, and you should go watch
Exactly.
Yeah.
Listen,
Or listen
because
to
you
it.
know.
They have two people.
Either
we've
way.
we've had Max on, he's delightful, and then General Hoff or Sarah, she did the infamous or very, very famous Stoic Beard in the Sky.
Mm-hmm.
So yes.
So yeah.
Anyway,
Anyway, good on you, Dragon Academy Dropouts.
Yes.
Anyway, next
well,
topic.
Sorry, back to the original point that I was making before we go to the next topic. Like, making the dragon character episodes would be interesting, because you think in terms of Toothless, you could talk about Toothless without Hiccup in a single episode whatsoever, and you don't even need the TV show to do that. You could make a whole episode based off the first movie itself. We could. I'm not gonna say you could, because like that's saying like the audience could, but they have different time scales. I'm saying we could make a full hour-length episode on Toothless without talking about Hiccup, or at least talking about him for a little bit, but making this episode mainly about Toothless. For the other dragons, we're gonna have to bring in the writers. We're gonna have to bring in their relationship to the other dragons to barely probably eke out over like 45 minutes, in my opinion.
I think you might be able to get away with it with Hookfang and
Meatlug.
Meatlug
Meatlug for sure.
to a degree.
Yeah.
Astrid might be a little bit harder, and
Yeah, because like the most Stormfly
or
has had has
Stormfly.
been basically the most recent season with Garf, but that was like I didn't really even like that episode. That was kind of forced, but we could get onto that if we do the character episode. Ooh, no. But yeah, like Hook Fang for sure. And be like we could probably make that comfortably, I'd say. But it's just not the same if you can't do it with all the dragons. So yeah, just on that point of the episodes. But yes, I agree. Like we've only done Toothless as a dragon character, and that speaks volumes to just how important the other dragons are. Really.
Yeah. Okay, so are we done with this? Because I'm kind of in a hurry to go somewhere. So let's fast track the rest of this.
Let's go.
Okay, so no matter what we answered in question one, do you think the dragons are a gimmick in this franchise?
In what sense do you mean gimmick? I mean, I obviously don't know what you mean when you write these, but you could have a separate meaning for what I interpret it as.
Okay. Well, a gimmick can be pretty much interpreted in two different ways. One, it's the one thing that sets it apart from than the other animated movies on the scene. And also there's, I guess you can say there's a gimmick in terms of, we have a new dragon, we have new dragons in this new movie, or also the fact that, like I said, Toothless is the character that sells the merchandise.
See, that's what that's how I interpreted this is just a fad, right? And in the TV show, yes, it's like, we have a new dragon, we have new dragons this season, new dragons. But in the movie, absolutely not. We say again, it's one of those things about them being the background characters or the background of the scenery. It's not something that sells. I mean, they used a book name to really sell, quote unquote, even though it didn't fit. But if you look at the trailers, I mean, I'd have to rewatch the first one, but the second one, that was going off the first movie, but that really went off just a world building idea. They didn't use the dragon. I mean, they used them as beautiful scenery to add to it, but it wasn't really a gimmicky sense. So I don't think. Again, it's like, this is kind of the other hand of that other question. Does the franchise detract from the dragons? No. Do the dragons detract from the franchise? No. Sort of. That's I'm just interpreting it another way. Like, the dragons are not gimmicky, basically.
Okay. Wolf, what about you?
I would say I'm going to disagree with Rush a little bit. I would say, the dragons are somewhat of a gimmick, in the fact that, again, like, if you can replace them to some degree, if you can replace them within the story, then yes, technically they are somewhat of a gimmick. However, with that said, right, I would say that I don't think the movie uses them in such a way that I don't think either of the movies or the show, for that matter, use them in a major way where you feel like they are a gimmick and you feel like you could replace them so easily.
Okay. I'll say this. In terms of marketing, then yeah, definitely. Like, again, when let's say we are a bunch of kids, not in heart, but actual kids, and we go to a Toys R Us and we want to pick up a toy from How to Train Your Dragon. Do we go for the fish legs toy or the meat leg toy? Because I'll be honest, forget the fact that I have a giant toothless plush staring at me as I'm recording this over here at my geek corner. But if you told me that I could get only one more How to Train Your Dragon toy that's not a dragon, I'll just pick Hiccup, to be honest. Like, I like the other characters just fine, but to be honest, in terms of humans, Hiccup is the only one I'll really put on a shelf, because the other ones, I want to have the dragons. The dragons are the one with the cool designs. The dragons are the ones that can probably, in terms of how to design a toy, you can do a lot more with the dragons than the humans. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I would agree. You might be able to grab, like, in terms of interesting looks, like I might grab Stoic or Gobber. Because that'd be interesting. Like, or
Again,
Valkyrie.
I may do it as well. I speak right now because I don't see it in front of my eyes, and once I see something like this in front of my eyes, I am usually tempted to buy it. But anyway, so in terms of marketing, yeah, because again, Toothless is the thing that sells the merchandise, not the humans. On the other hand, in terms of the franchise itself, movies and such, it depends on how much this is played in the marketing. Because as far as I remember, the marketing for the movies don't really advertise the new dragons as much as the plot of the movie, which is Hiccup, like in the first one, Hiccup finding Toothless and befriending him, even though it's wrong. Or in the second one, Hiccup discovers that his mother is still alive, and there's a new threat coming that he needs to overcome. So again, in terms of these trailers, they advertise you something about Hiccup, the main character, and Toothless and the dragons are just there for the ride. It's another thing that you take into account, but they don't. In terms of the shows, for the most part, in trailers, they do play out there are going to be new dragons. So in terms of the show, yes, but then again, you can kind of get away with this in the show because you have more time to work with. So I'll say in the show more than the movies.
Fair enough.
Also, one more quick thing. Let's assume, and it kind of again, we're kind of making a quick transition to the final conversation of this episode. But if let's say we take the dragons out of Race to the Edge, and Hiccup and Viggo were just negotiating about other kind of stuff, not necessarily magical creatures like dragons, but just negotiating.
Let's give us something to focus on for this question. Replace the dragons with hippogriffs. Something that can fly. It's not a dragon, but it is something that can fly. Replace the dragons with hippogriffs. Now ask your question.
Okay, but that's not the point I want to bring up, though. That's for later. What I do in terms of the gimmick part, again, let's bring up the scene we brought up earlier with Hiccup and Viggo.
He made it sound like we were moving on.
Yeah, Mr. I have somewhere to be.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'm getting a bit confused when I'm starting talking about this. Like, I need to be somewhere. It can wait. Anyway, just to quickly sum it up, let's bring back the scene with Hiccup and Viggo. And again, let's take out the dragons. The dragons don't exist. They are just negotiating world peace, let's say. Would you say it's an animated show that kids can watch as well?
They could, but they wouldn't see any. I think for the kids, it's very gimmicky. Like, you get the dragons for the kids. Otherwise,
yeah, exactly.
You just have Ashton would be shot in the leg with an arrow, and then it would be pretty dark. How's your leg healing up without any? Oh, it's fine because she was protecting your dragon. No, she was just shot with an arrow, flat out.
Exactly. So that's what I want to, and that's the proof, the point I want to back up my claim that in the shows they are a gimmick. That's it.
No, I absolutely said they were, although for a different reason. Mm-hmm. Well, no, I said the dragons, they sell, so really gimmicky in that sense. Anyway, yes, now we're on to the hippogriff analogy.
I'll quickly say depends on how much you develop the hippogriffs, because if any of them, if you like make a type of hippogriff that can do this, but and the other one can do that, that's some specific abilities here. Then
no, I was saying, like, the next question on the script is, if there were no dragons, do you think anything in the overall plot would change, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we really, in the sense of replacing them, we've answered that, but you can't even like now. Let's just say you had this plot, or you had this idea, but you didn't have any dragons whatsoever. Well, then what are they fighting? Why does they need to change? So like, if we said, if there were no dragons, would the overall plot change? Yes, because then Hiccup would have to find some other way to not be a village screw up and redeem himself. But if you replace them, then as Wolf has said, you can have almost the same exact story.
Looking at this question now, this could be a topic for an episode.
It'd be an interesting
episode alone. Yeah. So for now, let's close it with. Depends on what you replace the dragons with, if you replace them at all.
Okay. Yeah, I can agree with that. To a degree.
We'll come back to this question at a later time. Not necessarily next week, but yeah. So overall, we just said that it's not necessarily about the dragons, but the dragons are a major part of it. That's pretty much the basic conclusion we came to.
They have a role. They play that role. That role could possibly be filled by something else. Things would potentially change to a degree, but the overall message and meaning would still be the same, in my opinion. Even if the dragons were replaced with something else, the message and the meaning would still be the same. The overall story would still be fairly similar. It might be a little bit more silly if you look at it in terms of just straight replacing them and nothing altered scene-wise, but overall, yeah, you could definitely replace them, and it would still be a fairly similar story and a fairly similar franchise. With that said, I think the movies and even the show has done a good enough job as of right now to make it feel like the dragons do belong in this world and play their part and have their part and their role.
Okay. So... shall we close the discussion, because I really need to go.
Yeah, no, we're fine.
Okay, so that's been all for this episode of the Berkcast. We hope you enjoyed. If you want to tell us if you think the franchise is about dragons or not, and whatever else comes with it, then you can do this on Tumblr, where we are known as Berkcast Team. On Twitter, we are Berkcast with capital B, capital C. And you can find all three of us on the Berkcast forums. So until next time, I was HC.
I was Rush.
And I've been Wolf.
And we will see you all next time. Take care.
Bye-bye.